All right, Trevor Timmins, you're the Assistant Director of Amateur Scouting for the Columbus Blue Jackets, but you've spent a long time in this game, so I kind of want to go back to the beginning and ask you how it all started. How did you get into hockey in the first place?
Sure. Well, do we have enough time to make a movie? It's my 31st year in the National Hockey League. So it all started, I did a master's in sport administration at the University of Ottawa. And instead of a thesis, so there was an internship component. And I started with the Ottawa Senators the first day of their first training camp back in 1992. I walked into their offices that day and they threw me a t-shirt and a list of players' names, arrival times at the airport, told me, go pick up these players, take them to the rink, drop off their equipment, take them to the hotel. So that was my start to the National Hockey League. And I graduated at Christmas of that year, 1992, and they hired me full-time as team services. So I started as a team services, which was great. I mean, it was a great learning experience. And back then, we didn't have cell phones. We didn't have laptops. You know, communication was by telephone. And we had a brand new rookie GM who had never worked in the National Hockey League. He was a longtime player, Mel Bridgman. So, you know, there was a lot for him to learn and digest, and I was there to help him. So any questions he had, he gave them to me, and then I communicated with the head office of the NHL, and you know, that was before any, you know, real CBA. There was nothing in writing, just memorandums and whatever. So it was, you know, I was learned by getting thrown into the fire and asking a lot of questions and finding my way. And it was great because in that position that I had as team services, I traveled with the team and looked after all the immigration. I worked with the trainers, medical and the equipment trainers. I worked with the coaches. I worked with the general manager. I worked with the scouting staff, the president, all those positions. So it was great learning for me to get in there and understand what everybody did and help out in all those different areas. So that's how I got started. And I gradually, the next year I did team services and I was strength coach because I had a strength background. So, and tell you a funny story, that year our team was really bad in Ottawa. The coach, which was Rick Bonus, a great man. I mean, he took me under his wing like a son, and I learned a lot from him, and he took good care of me there. The team was so bad. We played the Detroit Red Wings at home, and he was so upset with the team. He said, those guys respect you more than they respect me, so you're coming on the bench. So I was on the bench for a game, and that was quite the learning experience. But in the end, we lost the game anyway, so it didn't matter. But it was a great learning experience. And I gradually worked my way up. I had 6 different GMs over 10 years. And, you know, I stuck it out. I worked my way up to scouting coordinator, and I asked to, you know, can I do some scouting while I was being the scouting coordinator? So I went to games when the director of player personnel came in, when the director of amateur scouting came in. I drove with them to games and asked questions during the game on the way, long drive homes back to Ottawa. And so that was how I learned the business of scouting. Obviously, there was no, what we use now called RinkNet. We had our own scouting database. So I was in charge of entering all the data. Anytime a player was sent, you know, down to the American League, I would have to enter that information for all the NHL teams. So I got to know all the players throughout the leagues, you know, their contract information. And I was also helping the general manager with contract negotiations as well, doing all the background work. So that was my learning experience and how I jumped into scouting. And then eventually, I just lucked out. One year, Rick Dudley became general manager, and Ray Shero, longtime GM in the NHL, was our assistant GM. Well, Ray left in November to join the Nashville Predators. So that position was open, and Rick needed a lot of help, so he gave all Ray Shero's duties to me as assistant general manager, plus I was doing my own stuff.
Right.
So it was a lot of work, you know, but I learned a lot. I got to do contract negotiations. I was in charge of the budget, expenses, in charge of pro scouting, amateur scouting, player development, camps, all that stuff. So there was a lot of work, but I learned a lot. And I got to work with all the different departments throughout an NHL team. You know, accounting, marketing, ticketing, all that stuff. So, you know, I had a good relationship with everybody, understood how an NHL organization operates. And then, you know, an opportunity came for me to leave Ottawa and join the Montreal Canadiens as director of player personnel, which was, you know, a good opportunity for me at that time. I'd always been a Montreal Canadiens fan growing up. So it was a great opportunity for me at that stage of my career where I didn't have to be in the office all the time. I could concentrate on scouting, and it was just the right opportunity. I didn't have to move. I could stay in Ottawa, and that's where I started, you know, to be in charge of scouting, in charge of the draft. So I was in charge of the NHL draft for the Montreal Canadiens back then. My first draft was in 2003, and then I was there for 20 seasons. You know, different titles, but basically the same job.
So what's your first season with the Blue Jackets been like then?
Oh, it's been amazing. I mean, my first day, you know, I drove the 10 hours down to Columbus from my home. And, you know, I was lucky enough to be in the room and part of the management group with Jarmo and JD and Basil and Josef. And, you know, when we signed Johnny Gaudreau, that was a pretty exciting day for us, you know. So that was my initiation to the Blue Jackets. And, you know, it was a fun day. And so the season has been great. I mean, it's great. It's a great organization to work for, you know, from top to bottom, really good people, and everyone has been welcoming. You know, I've learned a lot about Columbus that I didn't know in the past. I mean, it's a hidden gem in the NHL. You know, I didn't know that. I had never spent much time in Columbus, but it's a great city. The fans are outstanding. I mean, I come from the Montreal Canadiens, some of the most passionate fans in any sport, and Columbus is right up there with them. I mean, even though we had a tough year, you know, I got to one of the home games later on in the season, and I couldn't believe the support. You know, it was outstanding. And it's been really fun. I've learned a lot of new things. It's my first year ever working for an American team.
Oh, wow.
So it's a little different, you know, a little less spotlight from what I'm used to in Montreal, which is fine with me at this point in my career.
So tell me about this draft process then, because you just said it. You've worked just about every job there is in management to this point, and you've been a part of so many different NHL drafts. So do you just love this process? Yeah, I miss this. I mean, the 2 years that COVID scrapped the NHL Combine, you know, I missed that. And then last season, I wasn't involved in the draft. I wasn't working at that time. And so it's been 3 years. So, you know, it's been refreshing to get back here. You know, you watch these players on the ice all season, you know, and you can meet the players once in a while, but we leave the individual meetings, you know, with the players when they're playing for their teams with our area scouts, and then Ville and I meet them here. So it's great to put a face, you know, with a number that we watch all season long. And it's very interesting because the way they play on the ice really correlates to the personality that comes across in these interviews. Yeah. That's very, very interesting to hear that. And it's nice to hear that, because you look at some of the players the Blue Jackets have the opportunity to draft at number 3 overall. And I guess that leads me perfectly into my next question. What do you think of this crop? Because this year there is so much talent, not just at the top of this draft, but really throughout the whole first round and into the second. Yeah, it's really evolved this season into a really strong group at the top. And, you know, teams picking from 1 to 10 are going to get a really good player. And there's going to be players drafted after that are going to be really good too. Yeah. But there's a lot of blue chip prospects, you know, in the top 10 for sure. And even beyond that, there's going to be, you know, a few guys that are blue chip prospects as well. And it's really important, you know, for us to find players even in the 7th round. It's vital for your organization to sustain, you know, the prospect pool and coming through. And you need those later round picks to evolve as well. So every pick's important. The 7th round pick is just as important as the 1st round pick to us. How do you feel that the Blue Jackets process compares to that of, I don't know, the Ottawa Senators when you worked there, or the Montreal Canadiens when you worked there? And I'm not asking specifics, obviously, there, but is it any different at all? Because I feel like this organization has had a ton of success under Jarmo Kekalainen and the current management team in finding those late round gems that you're talking about. Yeah, it's very interesting. Like Jarmo and I worked together with the Ottawa Senators, you know, and he was in charge of the amateur draft, and I was there to help him in Ottawa. And so we came from the same mentor,
in a man named Marshall Johnston.
Yep.
And so a lot of similarities with the way I took and did in Montreal with what Jarmo and Ville do here. It's very similar. And, things have evolved. They've evolved in different ways. I evolved in different ways. So it's been good, to learn to see what they've been doing and put it all together into this process. But you always need to evolve with the times. I mean, analytics is part of this now, which it wasn't, when we were in Ottawa together, and it's a big part as well.
There's obviously healthy debate among the fan base right now about who the Blue Jackets should select at number 3 overall. How much have you enjoyed the healthy debate in that room? You mentioned it before we hopped on the air here. When I talked to Zach Erbach about it, he talked about liking to, stand up and kind of vouch for a guy, you know what I mean? Or the area scouts will do that for their guys. How fun is that internal debate and really coming to that consensus list of here's how we have guys ordered?
Yeah, well, it starts right from the start of the season. I mean, it's very important in a scouting staff and management staff to communicate all season long. So right now, I mean, it's no surprise that, I understand the way Ville's thinking or Jarmo's thinking, myself and our area scouts, because we communicate all year long. That's very, very important in reading their reports and whatnot and staying. So there's no surprises. Right now, it's important for us to feel comfortable with these players at the top, and figure out and see which ones, fit the culture that we've established in Columbus. So it's very, very important for us to spend time with them, get to know them as people, not just as hockey players, but as people, and make sure they fit into the culture. Because a player can get to what we call their floor of their potential, just by their ability, their talent. But to reach their ceiling, their full potential, that comes from character. So that's why these interviews are important. That's why spending time with them is important, that we can understand and feel comfortable that they have the character, and which ones have that and which ones don't, to allow them to reach the ceiling. And we're looking for a guy that can carry the Blue Jackets, into the playoffs, into a Stanley Cup, and be, a top player for us for a long time.
The last thing I've got for you, and I really appreciate you taking the time to do this. I know it's a very busy weekend here at the NHL Combine, and really it has been an entire busy week. You mentioned all the interviews that you guys have done, and you just talked about it right there, getting to know these players on a more personal level in these interviews. That has to get you really, really excited for the guys that you're interested in for the Blue Jackets at number 3 overall. So picture you're in Nashville on June 28th. How excited are you for that moment?
I've always said, for these 30 years that I've gone through this, it's our Super Bowl.
Yeah.
The amateur scouting staff, our job is cyclical. It's a 365-day process. So we're getting near the end. It's our Super Bowl. It's the big day, and we want to win that Super Bowl. It's always nerve-wracking because we're picking third. We all know who's going first, but we don't know 100% who's going second. So at third, it's sort of a wait and see, but we're ready for every scenario, and we'll have discussed every scenario, and it's going to be an exciting day, and our fans don't have to wait too long. I mean, 2 picks, and then we're up on the board. So it's going to be exciting.
Yep, I cannot wait. Trevor Timmins, thank you very much for taking the time. This was great.
Thank you very much.